more interestingly as well, though, is an interview or a discussion, I suppose, more correctly, that you had with Matthew Perry from Friends back in 2013. I think it was.
It's some long time ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that a Newsnight
It was
episode?
Newsnight.
Because it was when Newsnight was still good, right?
Jeremy Paxman, yes.
When Newsnight was still actually a good programme.
But when I went along, it was to discuss a rather obscure subject of drug courts, and I thought that Molly Meacher, Lady Meacher, who was my main opponent, who looks like the sort of housewife who knits next to you on the bus.
Yes.
There's actually a hotshot drug legalisation campaign and quite tough in argument. I thought she was going to be the main problem, and then along comes this guy from Friends. I'd never watched Friends.
Right. Of course you have.
Is it Matthew Chandler or something Bing? I couldn't
Yes.
work out who it was, and he became very animated. Actually, the whole thing became extremely enjoyable.
Yeah.
It was a good rough and tumble did.
Well, as I was saying
it's been immortalised on YouTube. And
well, it's
millions of people have watched it, many of whom hate me as a result.
Absolutely. Well, of course, as per usual with the reaction of social media. I mean,
I should say, though, from the beginning of this, Matthew Perry has died, and I bear him no animus. I've never resented this thing. I thought he behaved perfectly reasonably in hitting as hard as he could in a tough argument between two opposing philosophies. I offer my sympathies and condolences to his family and friends, and I hope that he rests in peace.
Yeah.
I have nothing against him at all, and I wouldn't have got involved in this in the slightest, except that all over social media people tried to attack me through his death, and I felt I can't not defend myself and leave this untouched, or people will think I have no defence.
But this is another
absolutely
example.
no animus against him, nor any desire to use his death for any purpose.
But it's another example, Peter, isn't it, of the kind of ridiculous baying mob mentality that exists in almost every subject.
I'm afraid so,
particularly on social media. I mean, you know, tragically, Matthew Perry died at the age of 54
It's
over the course of the weekend.
sad for someone to die.
And of course it is. And I mean, funnily enough, as I said, I hadn't actually seen this clip. We're going to watch it in a minute. I hadn't seen it. I don't know what I was doing in 2013, but I was certainly around. But I obviously wasn't watching Newsnight because I didn't remember seeing it. Several people sent it to me and said, "Oh, will Peter be able to talk about this when you talk to him on Monday?" And by the time the end of the day came, I was thinking, well, I don't even need to ask him. But let's watch now as Matthew Perry and Peter Hitchens discuss the nature of addiction.
I'm a drug addict. I'm a person that if I have a drink, I can't stop. And so it would be following your ideology that I'm choosing to do that. I'm choosing...
That's exactly not my ideology, it is my belief. Yes, you do choose.
It is, and it's a belief that you wrote in your book, correct?
You have a choice over whether you drink or not. You have a choice over.
But your book is the only book in modern times that has this ideology. Yeah. So doesn't that teach you something?
You tell me what the objective diagnosis is to establish the existence of addiction in the human body.
It's an obsession of your mind and an allergy of your body. So this is what happens to me. I start thinking about alcohol, I can't stop. I'm in control of the first drink, and so I do all these things to protect myself from not having the first drink.
Sure.
But once I have that drink, the allergy of the body kicks in. This is all documented alcoholism proof. Then I can't stop after that.
I mean, I found the discussion actually fascinating.
It makes me smile to see it again.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an engaging guy to be in the same room as.
And he wasn't shy as well, which is often not the case with... He was obviously a very smart guy. He was obviously a very funny guy, because he was not shy at sort of poking fun at you.
Absolutely
and suggesting that you stand alone now as the only man with this actual belief system.
That's right, yeah. No,
which, as I pointed out to a few people this morning, I said, well, Peter Hitchens is not unused to being accused of the only man in the room who believes what he believes.
No, I am not, no.
It does happen quite a lot.
I'm terribly sorry to say that experience tells me that often it's the thing to be.
Yes, but to develop it...
To be alone is so often a sign that you're on the right track.
Well, I immediately...
The mob is always wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a sort of... I'd call it an anti-authoritarian sort of bent, whereby if everybody believes one thing, I tend to start believing the other.
I don't do it for that reason. I just find myself... I wake up in the morning, I develop an opinion, and I find that people are going in the opposite direction, and this doesn't... discourage me.
Right.
That's the crucial thing. It's sometimes nice to get support. They generally only get fairly modest support for anything I say, but it doesn't discourage me when people mock me. Or I've been insulted by experts.
Yeah.
Going right back to the days of Alistair Campbell, who is indeed an expert.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that in an argument. Sometimes I will resort to it myself because it can be fun and it can be educational. But in general, it's a poor way of arguing if you've got any stocks of logic or any stocks of facts to use. But what I was arguing, the reason why the Matthew Perry event went viral and has continued to do so is partly he referred to it in his memoirs, which he published a couple of years ago, and partly because it just became more and more widely circulated. It's a clash between two fundamentally opposed ideas of morality and philosophy. I don't. I disparage the idea of addiction because I believe fundamentally that we have free will and choice in what we do. This is not an argument which you can settle. And other people prefer to believe that we don't have choice and free will and that our actions are determined by forces we can't control. That is a huge argument.
It is.
Well worth having. And that's what it was.
Right. But is it also not right to say that it may not be one or the other, that it could be somewhere in between? This was a conversation I was having earlier on today because, you know, there are certain things that you can become physically addicted to, I believe. For example, nicotine is a very addictive substance. It's not to say that you can't stop smoking. Is there not evidence to suggest that there are possibilities that you can become addicted to certain things?
I have written in a magazine, American magazine called First Things, a long article called The Myth of Addiction, which I recommend everybody who wants to go through this. And also I had a clash with somebody who calls himself Citizen Sane on the internet some time ago and persuaded him. The problem with addiction is it's a shapeshifter. The people who use the word sometimes use it to mean a total, unbreakable power, which it has people utterly in its grip. And then the same people in different conversations will use the word to mean actually something you can resist. It cannot be both. And the legal system and the medical system increasingly treat people, particularly the users of certain drugs, as if they have no free will, as if they have a disease they can't control. I think that's actually rather insulting to people who do have diseases such as cancer, which they would gladly give up if they were able to do. And I also think it doesn't help the people who are taking those drugs. If they're told you're in the grip of an irresistible force, they're not going to stop. You mentioned nicotine. Now, I agree with you. It's an incredibly compulsive habit, and those who take up smoking cigarettes are find it very, very hard to give up. But in my generation, I have found huge numbers of people doing so. So
well, I'm one of them.
If there is
I'm one of them, which is why I say it. I mean,
there's a thing called addiction, and it can also be overcome. And it doesn't mean what most people mean when they use it. This is the problem with it. It is, as I say, it's a moral and a philosophical problem, which people get very angry about for that reason. You're taking sides. How much power do we have over what we do? Is really what it's about. How much choice and freedom do we have to decide whether to be good or bad, to do wrong or do right? I say an immense amount of choice.
And interesting.
Other people say less, and that is the huge difference.
Well, I thought what was interesting was what Jeremy Paxman actually interjected in. I know that's probably just a short clip of the entire conversation, but when he said to Matthew Perry, well, surely you are practicing willpower right now by not having a drink, because otherwise you'd be drinking all the time.
Well, there is an answer to this. The pro-addiction people say, well, yes, what he has done is he's overcome the effect of the addiction, but he is still, in fact, addicted.
Yes.
Which is, again, it's a rather philosophical point, but it is what they say.
Right.
But sure, and that is where it goes. That is why the use that people make most of the time in conversation, and a lot of the time, as I say, when people are dealing with cases in court or when doctors are dealing with people who are habitual users of drugs, is to use it as an overpowering force. And in the article in First Things, I quote some interesting people, including Russell Brand, on this overpowering force argument.
Yes.
And the point about it is you cannot say that and then accept that people can stop doing it. And it just doesn't work. And I'm surprised that more people don't resist it.
I used to
it doesn't help the drug taker.
No.
It doesn't help the smoker, in my view.
No, I mean, I gave up smoking after many, many years of having started it when I was about 16 and finally gave it up about 7 or 8 years ago. Completely cold turkey. I just said, I'm going to stop. And I did. But not everybody can do that.
Not
and I
everybody
accept
can.
that. And I also remember a friend of mine, you might remember him as well, a guy called Mike McDonough, who was a journalist, formerly from the Daily Mail years ago, ended up in America. He was a recovering alcoholic, and he was very much part of that, you know, you're always an alcoholic even when you stop drinking. And he used to have an incredible kind of array of distractions, if you like, to stop him from drinking. Like, he would take a very long time to do everything. I'd agree to meet him for breakfast or something in some hotel on the Story, and he would take an hour to come down because he said, I have to literally stop myself from wanting to drink.
People do develop methods,
Yeah.
and all credit to them. But the fact
But
is,
would he be
they do
addicted?
develop them.
Would you
and
call him an addict then,
And
or
they
not?
succeed. And I won't name her, but a very good friend of mine in journalism drank a great deal for a long time and enjoyed it for a long time. And then she decided it was doing her nothing harm, professionally and personally, and she just stopped.
Right.
Bang. I've no doubt she resorts to all kinds of private methods. She's a very devout Christian, as it happens, to avoid returning to it. But she stops. People can, and it's astonishingly impressive when they do. And I think we should encourage them to do so. And I think telling people you have no power over this doesn't help people to give it up.
No, and I think a lot of people agree with you on that one.